Right, welcome to my next video, and I want to thank everyone who watched my video of yesterday in which I discussed basically the combination of reasons as to why I decided to leave Bulgaria in December this year. I will make this video now, which will perhaps turn out to be quite long. I will just put random footage. I'm starting off here in the lounge of Sofia Airport, and I'll put some footage of my trip to Spain of last week. I do want to get back to some things about the video of yesterday. I'm quite surprised that many people have been sympathetic as to the issues I have experienced and understanding of them being minor issues but eventually contributing to the reason why I would decide to leave. By the way, in the video this is arrival in Valencia, Spain, local metro. Anyway, continuing. I'm quite happy that people were understanding generally in the comments instead of offended, which I expected. Not that I would care per se if that happened because they were my impressions, but more understanding than I generally expected. And it seems that people have perhaps shared experiences. So I'll make perhaps a separate video or even this video about forces and experiences driving people away from Bulgaria and largely speaking the Balkans, because these syndromes, these little issues have driven many people to despair and eventually leaving their motherlands. I might just have to do a separate video about this, but generally speaking, people were also surprised as to why I would stay in the same apartment for 4 years when I suffered the issue of this smoke inhalation and whatnot. And yes, I'm pretty surprised by that myself. So, if you read the comments of my previous video, I go into detail a little bit more. But the smell is something I cannot really show you. The smoke I cannot really catch on camera. And it really depends on the particular day. But I've had moments where I came into my apartment, wanted to make a cup of coffee. My kitchen is a little bit fenced, or it has walls that close a little bit, so it goes through the whole apartment, but in the kitchen area it is particularly bad, and I've had moments where I literally put on my FFP2 mask from the COVID period, which I still have from a trip to Italy, just to make a cup of coffee. I was wearing that because the dust, the fine dust or whatever it's called from their cooking was so bad that I just couldn't breathe in my own kitchen. I just couldn't. And this in general as to why I accepted all of this, I think just alludes to Dutch people in general being extremely patient to a fault. Basically to a fault. What you should know about Dutch culture is that it takes a lot to drive people to the edge. Once they do, they don't look back. But people are generally cold-blooded. But once you reach the edge, it's done, right? It's just done. And in general, we are patient to a fault, but also generally, not always, but honest to a fault. Like, many people would be surprised that I've obviously talked about the smoke issue, the smell issue to my landlord. There's little they can do, like that was at least the official answer of also the construction company where I've also complained with. But eventually what happened is I just got driven to the edge by the whole smell thing, and I get these clapas installed, like a reverse clap where smoke externally cannot pass through my exhaust into my apartment, right? Generally that should help, but their oven is an industrial one, so it blows through anything. It doesn't matter what, it just blows straight through. Actually what I did is once went to the gym and I decided, hey, I'll just tape off the fence completely, see what happens. Came back, whole apartment in blue or black smoke from the hallway starting. Eventually I thought, okay, I'll just rip off the entire tube and tape that part. Then the smoke still continued, but was less than when I just taped the fence. I don't know why it is, because technically it's the same exit. I don't know the particular difference. but I just taped off the whole tube, just pulled it off, right? Put a plastic bag around it. As I was doing that, literally they were cooking and the smell just blew into my face. The smell of baked potatoes, grease blowing into my face. I just put a plastic bag around it, taped it as well as I could. That was the end of that. Now the smoke I think still enters through micro holes in the tube, or perhaps just through the wall itself because it's not entirely well closed off, but it's as good as it's going to get, and then I can pretty much deal with the smoke by just having my window open when there's not too many guests or kids outside screaming the whole day. Then I can pretty much tolerate it, and as I've earlier said, I believe it is a mafia type establishment. I'm not willing to escalate this any further. Call me a coward. I'm just not willing to go there anymore. Like, the decision of leaving was brewing for quite long, perhaps a bit too long, but eventually when I get presented the opportunity, the stars aligned, I just jumped at it. Now I'll show you a sound frame of how it sounds here. And you can obviously hear that this is not just a bit of blowback from the general pipe, you know, this blows straight into my house and it's an absolute nightmare. So, but I'll also show how the cracks develop on the walls, which I showed in an earlier video. I don't want to nitpick too much about it, but as I was saying, Dutch people can be honest to a fault. I was discussing my move with my landlord and eventually said, hey, I molested this tube a little bit. I don't know if I can restore it if I pull off the tape. Just take a bit off the deposit. By the way, I also chipped a towel in the bathroom by scrubbing it. Just take some of the deposit, you know, just whatever. That's how honest we are to a fault, and anything else doesn't come up in my mind. You might think I sound literally insane or easy to take advantage of, but I'm not. I like stray deals, right? My landlord was, apart from being unable to fix these issues, reasonable with me, and that's just a bit of my reflection about yesterday's video. And this sort of honesty, like I wouldn't call myself an angel per se, right? But in these things, I'm just quite pragmatic. And yeah, I would say honest. This is how we do business, and this is generally what makes our society a success story, as it's always been. Like, you need a high trust society to help it prosper, and that's where we generally conflict with other parts of the world which have had just less of a head start in being prosperous. Obviously, that's true. I'm not saying we're much better, but this is how I was raised. Like, I once vacuum cleaned my room when I was a kid. Like, we were forced to do that pretty much each Sunday. You just clean your own room. I was raised rather strict, but fairly strict, but fair. Always making my own living, never getting anything extra. Let's say strict but fair, and I'm very thankful for that. Once I was cleaning my room with my mom's vacuum cleaner, which I lived in the attic. That was my room. Cleaned it, accidentally broke something. I don't remember what. I think I just dropped it and the whole part of the plastic frame dropped. I dropped it down the stairs or something, don't particularly remember. I didn't say anything because I thought my mom would be angry. Like, I was quite young. I just put back the vacuum cleaner, just didn't mention it at all. Next day I came back from school. My mom said nothing. I thought, oh, that's strange. So I just went to my room. In my room was the vacuum cleaner, right, the broken one, with a note on it. It says, you broke it, you fix it, or you pay it. That's literally what my mom said. You might think this is insane, but that's how I was raised. Strict, but fair. And I thought it was fair because she wanted to make the point, like, I broke it. She knew I broke it because she heard me use the vacuum cleaner. She probably heard it drop. I didn't say anything, and that's bad manners, right? You fix it if you break it, right? I know it goes against nature because humanity, we generally want to get away with stuff if we can, right? It's intuitive, like, especially if it costs you something, like, right? If you drop raspberries in the store, like I mentioned in yesterday's videos, you would like to get away with that. Like, if nobody saw it, right? You would like to get away with it, but It was, I wouldn't say beaten out of me. I haven't been raised in that sense, but it was disciplined out of me with uh, these little tidbits of feedback that my parents gave me, these hints that this is not what you do. This is not what you do. And it translates in many ways. So my mom, she put this note on the vacuum cleaner, and I don't know how we fixed it. I thought I was just crying. Told my dad, and we fixed it together. Like they were reasonable in the end, right? One time we were in Germany on vacation. I was peeing. I was a small boy. I didn't put the toilet seat up, and I basically splashed all over the seat. My dad went. We were already outside of the cafe. Like I didn't clean up after myself. We were outside of the cafe. My dad said, "Who of you guys used this toilet?" And I said, "It was me, Dad." And he said, "Did you splash all over it?" And I said, "Yes, sorry." And he said, "Go back, clean it up right now." And that's how strict he was, and he was right. Like, that's basically the collectivist, for better or worse, nature of Dutch society. Now we have plenty of parents with modernity that are not like this, that just let their kid do whatever they want. Absolutely, we have big issues nowadays with society. It's changing a bit, just like anywhere else. But this is how I was raised. Once had a paper round when I was 12, 13, 14. I started working very young, I think when I was 13, 14. I was just a very small kid with a heavy bike, and I did a paper round. They put these bags on the back of your bike with tens of kilos of paper, and I just drove around the area. I think I made like uh, 10 euros on a Wednesday. Each Wednesday I made 10 euros. Uh, on a good month, I would make 40, 50 euros per month. That was how I made my first money when I was 13, 14, doing a paper run twice a week. Uh, Once I was loading up my bike and it fell against the neighbor's car. Uh, it literally fell against the car. I'm not sure if I scratched it. I just looked at it. I don't know if there was a scratch before. I pick up my bike. We were in this high trust society, so I just walk into my neighbor's house, like the door was literally open. That's how we used to grow up. And I said, "Hey, Dia, that's her name. I dropped my bike against your car. I'm terribly sorry. Can you come have a look what happened and see if the scratch was already there?" Actually, she came look like there was a scratch. She talked to my mom. I don't know how it was solved. It was pretty much ignored, I suppose. But walking away does not come up uh, in my mind. If I solve it, I fix it. This also translates into the success of my work. Sometimes I just make a mistake, I do something wrong with some work I do. First thing I do is obviously I think, can I fix this without needing to inform someone? Like, is this important or not? If anything is important, I just go straight to whoever leads our project and say, "Hey, I've messed something up. This is how I'll fix it. Do you agree? Let me know what you think. I'll work on it." And this translates in general in success because people eventually get to trust you and you build a sort of reputation. Which, again, I'm not saying I'm an angel, but I'm not necessarily an example to go by, but it is how I was raised, and it is how my software pretty much runs ever since then, without me realizing it, up to a fault even. We have a saying in the Netherlands that goes this way. It says, "Trust comes on foot and leaves by horse." That means you build it up very slowly, but once it leaves, it's gone, and it takes forever to return, right? And we pretty much live by that standard, at least to a great extent. I think anyone of my age, younger generations I haven't been in touch with much, still lives by these regimens, and that's what makes my country, and I'm pretty proud of that. I realized I've carried it over into everything I do. Uh, but that's the thing, like, it might be a bad thing to be so collectivist in your mind because in a sense, it might make you easier to be taken advantage of. And I think that's the case for a lot of Dutch people, where they assume that other people also function this way when they, for example, buy an apartment somewhere. It's easy to, for example, make them trust you, right? Like I said, honest to a fault. You assume the same of others because that's how society runs. But you soon find out when you find yourself in different levels of even perhaps the same society. It can be anyone else, right? That just pulls a quick one on you, and suddenly you find yourself either hoodwinked over something small, or you find your car dented without anyone leaving a note, and you realize, hey, why do people do that? That's incredibly rude. And you find this very rude awakening when you figure out that whole stretches of the world do not function like this, right? And I think in particular these innocent, cute countries like the Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, we get laughed at. We're sort of the laughing stock of Europe in many ways, where we're seen as woke, friendly, open to our own demise. But keep in mind that this comes from a good heart. It comes from a level of trust of giving people the benefit of the doubt. And this translates into many aspects of Dutch society. I once worked for a tour operator, an online tour operator. And I was a webmaster. I worked in IT back then. And I checked the website and I just tried to find out, can I hack this at all? Can I do anything bad if I wanted to? I just imagined myself being a rogue actor, right? And thought, can I log into the client file when I just do some random things? And eventually I found out that I could. I'm now going to continue with some footage of a previous trip to London. In any case, why did I start to research this hacking part for the tour operator? Well, my boss, who is in general a genius, like he built a company out of scratch, a successful online travel company with, I don't know, 20, 30 people. Sold it for a lot, and now he's retired since like 10 years. A fantastic man. He had the idea of storing credit card details of the client in the online database of, their own record, because that would help making or guaranteeing reservations or something. And I cautioned him against that because our website was basically handmade, handwritten code by another webmaster. And I said, yeah, perhaps you shouldn't do that because I'm afraid the website's not foolproof. Eventually, it had a sort of link where you could access the client file without a password if you just change the URL to a random different file name. So each client file had a code ABCD, right? So if you guessed XYZ, whatever for combo, for letter combo, you could get in a file if it existed without entering the password, just by modifying the URL. And I told my boss, hey, look at this. This is how I can enter the file. So perhaps you should really reconsider even having the address and the travel dates of a client there, because if I was a criminal, I would be able to log into this dossier. I would be able to see the address of a client and when they're out. Now that's valuable information in many ways, because I can literally just go there. If it's a nice house with a big garden, I have a week of time to just plunder the whole place. So perhaps you should be seriously careful with storing these things online. And this man is incredibly smart, but what he told me is, well, you shouldn't look at the world that way, because people are not born evil in that sense. And I found that incredibly naive. Now I've already even then I was street smart enough to understand that that's a very strange worldview to have. It's the ideal worldview, but it shouldn't be your worldview, because, like I said, you'll be in for a very rude awakening if something eventually happens. And he said, let's just continue with my plan. Let's just believe in the good of humanity and just trust that won't happen. And I said, well, you can continue any change you want, it just won't be on my watch. It won't have my signature under it, you know? Like, I caution you against it. I think he eventually reconsidered because he was not that crazy. He knew I was right, but his initial instinct was no, people wouldn't do that. Like, why would you approach the world in that way? And I think that's a fundamental difference between societies where we operate from this level of trust, which makes us sheltered from reality. And I think Bulgarians, being with the crisis they've had, like their parents grew up with rampant inflation, with a bank crisis, banks just freezing your funds, literally stealing your funds. I think that's what happened in the 90s. Then you got mob murders, cold blooded murders in the streets of Sofia in the year just before the years 2000. Obviously, that's all long gone, but that collective trauma, we live with collective trust, you live with collective trauma. And that's a fundamental difference in the head start that you've had as a modern young Bulgarian, which it can make or break you, and it definitely shapes the way you look at the world. And I think in general, the Bulgarian approach to things is more realistic. As we found since COVID, the world, you shouldn't look at the world necessarily through pink glasses because you want to be realistic and be prepared for anything, right? And the Dutch have eventually shifted a bit away from their level of trust. It's been hurt during COVID. It's been significantly weakened, the trust in the political system, for example. But nonetheless, it really affects your entire society up to the finest of details. Like, I have a Bulgarian friend who just doesn't want to have any money in the bank, right? Because his parents have lived through this rampant inflation or just a sort of heist that happened. And he's just very mistrustful, which you should be with banks. So, what I think Bulgarians have going for them is their street smarts, like their level of suspicion, which can serve you. Like, you won't be surprised if anything happens, right? And I think that's a good thing, to be on the fence and cautious with anything. And I think that's something that the more naive societies, which includes my own, definitely have to learn. Unfortunately, often the hard way, right? But I hope this is an interesting video for you, nonetheless. And as I said, these cultural things, they really crawl deep into every aspect of society. Like, I've had meals with Bulgarians in restaurants, and I say, "How's the food?" And they just say, "Better than expected." And then I say, "What do you mean better than expected? Why don't you just say it's good?" Well, because the head start is is that it will probably be mediocre and you'll be forked over for a huge amount, getting a small portion. And then if that's not the case, you're actually positively surprised and you say, it's better than expected. And who's right more often? Is it me who forks over $50 for brunch, right? And a couple of eggs? Or is it the Bulgarian who sets their expectations accordingly? I'll let you decide.